Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I thought I'd talk a little bit about Nietzsche's three metamorphoses of the spirit, something that he describes in his great work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Essentially, you might say that the Metamorphoses describe the process of spiritual transformation that characterizes his vision of the best human life, which involves something like one of complete self-overcoming. And just so it's clear from the start, the three phases he talks about are symbolically represented by first the camel, and then the lion, and finally the child. Okay, well, so let's start with the camel. So what's the difference between the camel and most herd animals? Well, it's this. The camel is a kind of carrier. He's a beast of burden. As Nietzsche says, he kneels down and wants to be well loaded. So for Nietzsche, what the camel symbolizes is something like the person with a strong spirit who's willing to serve a higher quest and who voluntarily takes on weight and who isn't scared off by difficulty or discomfort, which of course spending time out in the desert brings. Ultimately, what the camel does is it humbly surrenders its will to some higher moral or metaphysical cause. As Nietzsche himself says, the camel is reverent and it renounces. Okay, now all this seems to be important for those interested in starting out on that spiritual journey for self-actualization or self-overcoming, right? I mean, to leave the comfortable life and to head out to the loneliest desert and to renounce yourself and to serve some kind of higher cause, there is some value in this, and it is a start. Yet, here's the thing though. According to Nietzsche, ultimately, there's something deeply problematic or insufficient with the way of the camel. It's this. It's that despite his courage and his strength, the camel bows down too much and accepts the weight placed upon him. He's too deferent to tradition and to morality. He takes on too much of the weight of the codes of behavior and the ideals that have come way before him. In this way, he's still a follower, and so lives according to values and according to paradigms that are not at all his own. Actually, Nietzsche calls all these old values that the camel defers to and can't shed the great dragon. And I'll get to that in a second. But the general point is that the camel is not really free, which is really to say that he's both unable to destroy and unable to create. Okay, well, so in order for the camel to unburden himself and begin to create his own meaning and his own destiny, he has to undergo a new kind of transformation. What he has to do is he has to undergo the spiritual metamorphosis into a lion. Now, unlike the camel, who essentially, you might say, preserves things, for Nietzsche, the lion is symbolic of destruction. More specifically, the lion is a destroyer of both traditional and transcendent values. What he does is he destroys old values in an effort to escape their hegemonic hold over him. Ultimately, he refuses to bow down to anyone, to idols and to masters, and, well, to dragons. Now, I say dragons because Nietzsche symbolizes transcendent and traditional values as a great dragon. And it's this great dragon with its shining scales of values that the lion has to destroy. And Nietzsche calls the dragon by the name of thou shalt, which again is meant to refer to all the old moral rules, those centuries of old codes that have told us how we should or ought to act. Again, the lion wants to fight back against this great dragon, whose each scale glitters a different 1,000-year-old thou shalt. And that's because the lion sees the dragon as the great obstacle to true freedom. So instead of succumbing to the thou shalt, what does the lion do? Well, the lion says, I will. In other words, he asserts his own will over the dragon and tries to win his independence. By the way, something which takes great courage because, of course, it quickly results in self-alienation or a breaking off from all communal belonging. Okay, but now here's the thing. It turns out that pretty much the only way for the lion to do this is to create some space between him and the dragon, to be free from him. Notice then that ultimately his is a kind of negative freedom, not a positive one. That's to say, the lion succeeds in saying no to subjugation, but not really yes to a new creation. He's liberated himself from external values, whether traditional or transcendent, but he's got nothing to replace them with. The lion then is ultimately mostly reactive. That's to say, he exerts his power only against what is already established. He defines himself in opposition to what he's come up against. He destroys without creating. He says no without it being followed up by a new yes. He just doesn't know how to create his own new meaning from the emptiness that now surrounds him. He doesn't know what to do with his newly forged independence and freedom. Okay, but all that said, nevertheless, the lion has accomplished something very, very valuable. He's destroyed the old in order to make way for something new. Now, that's crucial, because it leads to the third and the final metamorphosis, the child. Okay, so as we've seen, there was a kind of nihilism that the lion left in his destructive wake. But in his freedom through negation, he cleared the way. And what he cleared the way for is the child and her new creations. Now, you might be wondering, why a child? After all, a child seems like a strange character to end the developmental sequence beginning with the camel, right? Well, to put it simply, for Nietzsche, the archetypal child actually just can't be any more appropriate. And that's because the child is, well, she is spring. She's a new beginning. She's a self-propelling wheel. The child, says Nietzsche, is a sacred yes. You see, while the lion was concerned with destruction, the child, well, she's in love with exuberant play and with spontaneous creation, especially the creation of new values. And that's essentially because of one very important reason. It's because the child is completely free from the past. And being free from the past, she's not weighed down by rules, and by life stultifying values, and by traditional morality, and by the ossification of the thou shalts. As such, the child is, well, she's beyond good and evil. She simply lacks the knowledge of morality. So because of this, she's able to create as she sees fit, regardless of the views of society. She's free to truly play and to create like a true artist does. She's wide-eyed. She discovers the world for the first time all the time, unburdened by what came before her. Now, this idea of being completely unburdened is really, really important. You see, according to Nietzsche, essentially what makes the child so important is that she is pure innocence and pure forgetting. And it's really the forgetting part that's the key here. Because the child's natural state is one of forgetfulness, she's always entirely free from feelings of revenge or free from holding grudges. Okay, but now here's the thing though. This is not the normal state of most people, is it? No, according to Nietzsche, most of us are always reacting to our past in one way or another. And so we're marked by revenge and by bitterness and by resentment. And there's nothing more debilitating, nothing more pathological, nothing more life-stultifying than this, Nietzsche thinks. Well, by contrast, the child has none of this. There is no sickness in her, no reactive battle against external forces that the previous Metamorphoses had to endure. No, the child exists without the seriousness and the spirit of gravity that marked the camel and to some extent the lion. Her freedom, her lightness, and her playfulness, and her complete lack of reactivity, all this is why only she can truly birth new values. And so to become a child, well, that is to overcome nihilism. Bye for now.